So I guess we're live.
Cool.
Welcome everyone. Welcome Neville from Glasgow, sunny Glasgow.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to everybody out there tuning in. And I hope everybody's doing okay in the current realities that we're all facing. Everybody's staying sane and safe, and keeping the creative juices flowing regardless of all this insanity. So yeah, today we're going to talk about the 65, the Alexa 65, in relation to Neville and I working with it on Umbrella Academy. And just any other questions, obviously you can fire away as we chat. But the backstory on Umbrella Academy is that Neville and I had both worked with Steve Blackman, who was the showrunner on the show, and I had never worked with Neville before, but obviously knew of his work, having enjoyed many seasons of Sherlock and other shows that he brought his mastery to. So I was happy to get the opportunity to work with him. And I interviewed with Steve, and Steve liked where I was coming from, and Neville and I spoke, and we got along famously right off the bat. And Neville was very inclusive in the whole process of getting the show going. And we can talk about, we're going to start talking about kind of how the show was set up, and Neville has some great resources to bring to the table about how that happened, and pitching the 65 and the challenges associated with that. And yeah, I think it's probably enough of an introduction. I think I wasted enough time with that. We can get to it.
Yeah, I think it's also good to say that the way we're working now is we're doing a lot of work with alternating EPs.
Yes.
It's a good world to kind of get into, like, a lot of collaboration. And, I had a great experience working with Steve McNutt on Outlander, and I've applied the same with you, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah, and it's kind of the new reality, because the TV is so ambitious now. The idea of one DP doing a whole season, it just doesn't seem practical. And also the directors don't have a DP to prep with, which makes it really difficult when you're doing ambitious work that requires a lot of preparation. And I know, having done a season of X-Files on my own, that it's doing ambitious TV on your own is tough. And ultimately it's a disservice to the directors in some level, because they only get you, maybe for the tech survey at best, and then for some lunch meetings. And, it's just not a great way to put together these ambitious shows. So it's a great way to work. And especially if, I have collaborators like Neville who, we see eye to eye, and we get along, and, it's just a great way to work.
And and it started with Martin Algren, the alternate DP I was working with on Altered Carbon.
Right.
And go back to what you said earlier, Steve Blackman was our shared kind of point of contact. Mm-hmm. Steve brought us both together. I think stylistically he loves, obviously, the work that you guys did on Fargo. And, he wanted to combine the kind of Fargo meets, Sherlock meets kind of Wes Anderson.
Yeah, with a little bit of Legion thrown in there too.
A bit of Legion and a little bit of Altered Carbon. I think that was the world that they wanted to create.
And that's the best thing about the show, is it's such a mix of everything. Like, I know myself, I've sort of brought every tool I have in the toolbox to it at one point or another, just because it kind of demands that. It's never one thing. It's always, every episode is 100 different things. Yeah.
But I think, the 65 is the kind of the king of cameras, from my point of view. And it's like, I always kind of say, it's like a fine wine, or, as soon as you use it, you're scuppered, because you have to use it forever.
Oh yeah. Now you know what good wine tastes like. You can't ever go back.
Can't go back.
I know. I certainly. It was my first experience with it. You'd had mileage with it on Altered Carbon, but my first experience with it, I remember the first day I went to visit set and was standing at the DIT monitors, and I was just blown away. Like, I sort of, researched it and obviously seen some stuff that had been shot with it, but to be in the room with it and to see how it transforms a space, and how it digs into every little nuance of what the set has to offer, the makeup, the wardrobe, like how it just pulls out all those textures, is just mind-boggling. And then when you start moving that camera around, that's a whole different animal too. Like, then the world becomes just so three-dimensional. And what blew me away is it's the closest thing I've found to actually feeling like you're moving, like you're walking through a space. The way we perceive space and dimension is the same way that camera does.
Yeah.
And that rocked my world. Like, I was just like, okay, this is what I've been looking for my whole life, you know, something that's immersive, that can put the audience right in the story without feeling like there's any layer between the audience and the story, you know.
And also have that ability to have selective focus on such a large kind of canvas.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
We're very happy. But,
it turns everything into a painting, you know.
Yeah. And I think our focus pullers lose it. Their calorie count they're losing every day is huge.
Yeah, it's the hardest on them for sure.
You know, and I've got to put you know, the thanks out to, you know, Mark Sear in season 1, David Nardi in season 2. You know, these guys were on A.
Oh yeah, unbelievable. I mean, pulling off stuff that I didn't think was physically possible.
Yeah.
And doing it on a TV schedule, it's, you know, I mean, they're the MVPs, you know, because it's the hardest format on them. I mean, it's a big camera, so it's harder on all departments, you know, in terms of rigging, and, you know, it's certainly hard on the Steadicam guy. But the, you know, the focus pullers are the ones who really take it on the chin, because it's just, there's nowhere to hide. You know, if you're out, you're out, and there's so much dimension to the image and so much clarity that it becomes painfully obvious right away to everyone, which is a tough place to be.
yeah, there's no
yeah, it's pretty rough. But I mean, in terms of the setting up the show, I mean, I was on X-Files in Vancouver when you were setting up the show, and I know that you and Steve had worked together on Altered Carbon with the 65. But what was the process to pitch it to Netflix? Like, how were they fairly open because they'd worked with it on Altered Carbon, or was it an uphill climb?
Yeah, no, the reason that we kind of went for the 65, because at that point, this was about 3 years ago, when, you know, everything was on 4K, Netflix had a list of cameras that had to be used, you know, for anything to be shot on their streaming service. Yeah. And the only, you know, ARRI camera at that point was the Alexa 65. So this is the days before, you know, the LF had appeared and everything. So Martin Ogren and myself were really keen to sort of stick with the ARRI look, because we've done so much work on Alexas over the years. We wanted to maintain that quality for Altered Carbon. So we just thought, why not? Let's see if we can try and get our hands on the 65. So it was a real, you know, we had to bring production in. It was like a real collaborative, you know, kind of work for all departments, for production design, for ourselves to kind of jump in and commit ourselves to the 65. And one of the reasons that people don't like it is because of all the data costs. So it was Martin Algren came up with the fantastic idea to shoot the 5K kind of crop of the 6.5K sensor, and that actually saved hundreds of thousands of dollars over the whole season. Right. And that's when it became doable from a production point of view. So Martin came up with a great idea of using the Canon Cineprimes fully open would match the 6.5K vintage lenses and all the Hasselblad lenses that we use for the full size sensor. So with a full sensor at 6.5 at 2.9 would match the 1.5 Canon at 5K. So we weren't losing anything visually. Right. So we did a lot of testing. So what we ended up with was a lot of different lenses. So we started with Canon Cineprimes. We had Zeiss compact primes, and we had Cooke S4s. And at that point, we had a Cooke S5 65mm, which we used for Altered Carbon, but we threw it out for Umbrella because there was just a little bit too much vignetting for Umbrella Academy World. You know, I think remember we kind of approached that one and we threw it away. So we'd done the research on Altered Carbon and took that kind of information into Umbrella Academy. Because the big problem again is when you're going full sensor with the full size lenses, it's a lot of physics involved where the minimum focuses become much larger. Right. So one of the big problems we had with, it was a 50mm, was 3 foot, I think 8 inches. You know,
yeah, very limiting.
Which is very limiting when you're doing episodic television. So that's the solution to go to 5K, solve that problem, got it back into like a 12 inch, 14 inches minimum focus.
Right. Well, thanks for doing all that R&D, because
Yeah,
must
well,
have streamlined the process to sell it to Netflix on this one.
Yeah, and that's when we discovered we weren't losing anything. We were saving money, and we were still having the benefits of the camera. We were not having to up our lighting costs by having slow lenses. So it kind of, electrics were happy, production was happy, and VFX were ecstatic because they were getting a fantastic resolution for their VFX.
Mm-hmm. And what did you use as references to pitch that? I mean, like I said, I was at arm's length to this process, and I know that you had to sort of go department by department to kind of talk everyone through it and get everybody up to speed. And was there sort of one common reference point that you used to get everybody to wrap their head around the idea of what this camera is and what?
Yeah, we had to do a pitch to Netflix, and I've got the pitch kind of file here, which I'll show you in a second. And there's one of my favorite artists is Robert Tushman, and he kind of does a kind of like a large format art that I'll show you in a second, that we could easily explain to anybody kind of coming in cold and not understanding the difference between an S35 sensor and a large format sensor. So we could give them a kind of visual example of what we were going to achieve with this presentation. And actually, once we did this presentation, I did a second presentation where I actually took one of the execs from UCP into Deluxe in Toronto and showed her the Alexa 65 footage from Altered Carbon up against some previous footage that we'd shot on an on a normal, ASC. And it just, when you look at it, everybody in the room's going, I want the 65, please. Thank you very much. Yeah. But I felt like I was doing my double glazing sales pitch. So,
yeah. Well, there is an immediacy to it that I think, regardless of whether you know anything about the technical aspects of it, there's an immediacy to the image that is kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of inherently human in terms of how we see. And you see that image, and it feels like how we're meant to see the world. And I think even people who don't understand all the mechanics and physics and technicality of it could still relate to that and go like, wow, okay, that's how we're meant to see the world.
Yeah, no, completely. I see we've got a question in. Someone's asking what the challenges of the increased resolution. And that's a great question, because you are seeing everything. And we did a lot of research with diffusion. And one that kind of came out strongest was the pearlescent filter. And that seemed to just take down that kind of digital bites. And, we kind of varied from half, sometimes up to 1, depending on how close we were getting. Yeah.
One of the things I love about the 65 is you get the increased resolution, but it's not necessarily an overly sharp image. You still get that beautiful, creamy, soft image, but it picks out every nuance of the sets. And that's one thing that I really noticed right away, was that, if something like the scenic painting department really earns their money with the 65, because if they do a nice patina on a set, or they do some aging, you feel all of it, even if it's like falling off. And I've got some images that kind of represent that, but you see everything, like it's just all there. And it's great because you see people putting all this effort into their work, and then when you see that, even though it's falling off, but it's falling off in that beautiful 65 way, the detail's still there, all the information's still there, but it becomes texture. It's so beautiful.
It's kind of like a polish, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. But I think, to answer Rod's question, I think the challenges for us are less so, apart from, the diffusion aspect. The challenges are for the other departments in terms of, really having to pay attention to detail, and, the fit and finish on the sets have to be so good. The textures on the sets have to be so good. Makeup has to be pretty immaculate. The wardrobe, you can be really selective about the textures of the wardrobe because it's all going to be there. So it actually opens up a lot of opportunities. But the thing I noticed, and especially with, the HDR aspect of it, is, some of the kind of tricks that I'd use to hide things, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh geez, I guess that little arrow in my quiver is going to have to go away. I'm going to have to, be more diligent about things. But I personally think that's great. I mean, I think it ups the level of the filmmaking just by virtue of having this camera there.
Exactly. So is it worth having a look? Shall we have can I try and share the screen and have a look at this pitch document?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because it's, I think everyone, especially with budget realities and all that, is fighting these battles to kind of pitch these cameras and try to get people on side. So it'd be great to see, the document you used. So
is that coming up?
I see it, yes.
Okay, so this is the document that we used to try and get Netflix on board and the studio on board with the Alexa 65. And this is actually a nice little kind of behind the scenes of what the kind of Umbrella Academy's intentions were. And I guess you guys can tell us how we succeeded in the kind of final kind of season. But this was our kind of ideas with all the kind of characters, combining costume, VFX, all the kind of SFX and prosthetics and makeup.
That's so great.
Every department.
It's so amazing seeing this now, now that we shot the whole season. To see kind of, how things evolved and how they changed, and how some things basically, were there right off the top.
And this was kind of early days of discussing what kind of, aspect ratio we'll be going with, whether, was it going to be 2:3:9? Was it going to be, 2:1? All that kind of stuff. So we were kind of playing around, and we realized the sets. I think one of the things we wanted to make the sets feel real, and I wanted to kind of reduce the amount of lighting, because this man here, when we go back, is 6'5". So compared to Ellen, who's obviously not 6'5", we'd spent a lot of time with the cameras low looking up. So we wanted to make sure that we could essentially do 360. So a lot of things were real. And that was kind of an intention from the very beginning. And
that's an important thing to take into account right off the bat. Like if, I know when I walked on the sets, everything we talked about in terms of, building as much light into the sets as we could, so that we did have that freedom where we could keep the look together, but move at the pace that's required, and also have flexibility with the camera. It was all there, and it was their dream sets to work on.
But it was a kind of naturalistic look, but also that wasn't. I think that I really enjoyed kind of the whole Umbrella Academy is just a couple of degrees off from reality. There's no internet, there's no mobile phones. The world is slightly odd, but it's still a little bit real, but not really. And I think
it's heightened. The whole thing's heightened, yeah.
But that was like kind of like a little nod to the graphic novels, to kind of have a kind of slightly popping out kind of feel, which is what the 65 gave us. I think it's a selective viewing, selective focus kind of helps. And the 65
and also the dimensionality of the camera. I really found that you could create, like there's that MC Escher image there, like you can create these very graphic structured frames because you're dealing with a wider field of view, but it's a flat lens. So you can use those wide lenses, which is one of my favorite things about it, because I've always loved wide lenses, but I've never liked to feel the lens, where it starts to feel cartoony and you start to feel the edges and the optics start to overtake the story. And I've always loved that with the 65, that you can have that sort of incredible dimensionality of the image, but it's flat, like the edges are still square. Like even when you're doing sort of what would traditionally be like fisheye type of work, you can still keep those lines. And I've got some images to reflect that too, but let's stay with this for now.
But it's that thing of, because we looked at anamorphic early on, but realized that we were going to lose too much top and bottom. And actually this show is not necessarily an anamorphic show. And it kind of, I think the 2:1 actually fits us perfectly.
Yeah, I think it kept a sense of scale. Yeah. That vertical aspect, especially with Luther and also with the 2-story set, the Umbrella Academy set itself. With the 2 levels, I think you would have lost some of that dimension and some of that scope if we'd have gone 2:3:9. You would have gained, obviously, the landscape aspect of it, but you would have lost all those beautiful vertical elements that we had.
And this is one of my kind of favorite films, In the Mood for Love, which has that sort of intimacy and kind of joy of color. And it was perfect as an example of what we were trying to do with the Umbrella Academy. And then the kind of the palettes where we're not afraid to kind of go into our cyans and our greens. And then that I wanted a little bit of a kind of, the light was always fighting to get in, you know, the world was kind of becoming into the sets to kind of help the sets feel real.
Yeah.
And these are good examples of how we were going to light it with the warmth. And this is our Tushman example of this kind of large format art, which is kind of the best example I could find to explain what we were going to do with the 65 to make the images pop.
Yeah, I know when you shared these images with me, that brought it all together. As soon as I saw these, I was like, okay, like it just snapped it right into place about what the show wanted to be. So great.
So that's a nice little insight.
So in terms of the process of getting the 65 on board, I mean, once people had that aha moment of seeing, you know, saying that's what I want, was it kind of a slam dunk from there, or was there still more layers to work through?
I think there's always, with a 65, I think it puts so much pressure on what you were saying earlier, production design, the art departments. They really feel it because everything has to be 100%, you know, real. Anything not quite, you know, if the sets are not quite 100% kind of quality, it's going to show on the 65. You know, and I think very quickly we learned the camera tests were great to sort of show what we can and can't get away with. And the production design from Mark Warrington and Mark Steele was just faultless.
Yeah, unbelievable, really unbelievable, and just created like you said, that kind of authentic. You know, it gave a really authentic feel to everything, which kind of gave us a nice platform to heighten it. You know, if the sets had been really sort of overly heightened to begin with, it might have been one thing too many, combined with, you know, the dimensions of the camera and our general approach. So, you know, everything was just tempered so beautifully and so gorgeous texturally, and the attention to detail and the world building. Like, you know, you watch the pilot, and the world you guys built in that pilot was just so fantastic in terms of understanding what this world is and how it works.
Yeah. Brendan Stacey's asking about is the 65 worth it over the LF? You know, because the difference isn't huge.
Yeah.
But actually, when you put the two side by side, it's huge. It really is.
It is huge.
And when I think it's a good example of when we had our LF as a C camera, the LF started to look like a S35 in comparison to 65 camera.
Yeah. I know there's an X factor to the camera that, you know, it's just, you can't put your finger on. And, you know, even though technically there's similarities, there's something about it that it's just its own thing. I love it. And there was a question from Daryl as well about, are we detuning lenses to take a bit of the sharpness that the larger sensors have? I know we didn't do any detuning. I mean, the Canons sort of they're kind of naturally detuned a little bit.
Yeah, they've got there. And I think we chose the lenses that did that. The same, you know, the Coupes have got a lovely quality that you don't need to really add anything else to.
Yeah.
And I think all our lens choices kind of fitted the moods that we were kind of creating.
Yeah, and, you know, in terms of the sharpness of the larger sensors, I've never felt that they were overly sharp. They're detailed, but they're not necessarily sharp, you know? I mean, I think the LF is sharper than the 65 for sure.
Yeah.
In the 65, you have so much more detail that's kind of creating that smooth, creamy texture. But I feel like it's, you know, you're gaining resolution without gaining sharpness, which is the holy grail.
Oh, we got a question regarding smoke. We used a lot of Atmos in our whole to bring out the shafts of lights, you know.
Yeah. And especially I mean, that was an education for me as well, that this being my first HDR show about, you know, how HDR can rob some of the smoke too. So you kind of have to compensate the levels for the HDR. I mean, I Gautam, our wonderful bit, took me into the truck early in my prep and said, you know, let me show you some HDR, non-HDR passes so you can get an idea of what you gain and what you lose with HDR. And the smoke aspect was a big surprise. And I know, because I remember walking onto the set going, my God, there's so much smoke in here. But then you look at the image and it's perfect.
Yeah.
So
but
yeah,
it's the HDR, isn't it? And I think so many people haven't seen the HDR.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a kind of 2.5D almost.
Yeah.
And you add that extra layer of texture is just gold. It just so much more kind of quality.
Yeah.
And when you see it on an HDR screen, because essentially we do 2 grades, one HDR and one SDR.
Mm-hmm.
The Atmos added to the world, and I think the Umbrella Academy was a character in itself, and
it helped with that heightened quality you talked about as well, where you felt like the world, and the world was just sort of one notch above reality, as you mentioned, and also it gave it another line, because one of the things I just obsessed with the 65 is the geometry of the sets and bringing out the structure and geometry of the sets. And when you can add another angle of geometry with the smoke, and one that you can control, where you can bring in a beam of light and alter the angle of it relative to the rest of the set, then it becomes a graphic element, which I just love.
Yeah, and I think that's Peter Hoare, our director on the pilot. We were very much keeping a perspective in all our shots, and Mark Warrington kind of gave us the most gorgeous sets that kind of gave us perspective. And I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it in the smallest of sets. He just gave us perspective that just kept going.
Yeah, I know. That's what I don't know that job well enough to be able to say what he did, but there's some magic formula there that you literally couldn't go wrong in those sets. Like, you just point the camera anywhere, and there was always something to put the eye where you wanted it to be, and then that combined with that fall off just put it right in the pocket so beautifully.
Yeah, and there's just a question about how we're monitoring for HDR, and basically we weren't monitoring live. We were just doing that in the truck. So Chris, our DMT, was basically looking at all our rushes all the time to make sure, because one of the problems we had was just small amounts of flicker with LEDs. So we had a very kind of rigorous, everything had to be tested that was put in front of camera.
Mm-hmm.
And that got rid of 99% of all our problems. And actually we had very few kind of times where we had to, something was kind of spotted. I think in all the time, we've only had about one or two kind of incidents where we had a small amount of flicker.
But it was so valuable having that those eyes on the truck looking at that image, because they're, like we said, there is nowhere to hide. So having that kind of last level of defense, quality control on the truck makes such a difference, because there's things, where it's very, very subtle. Like you said, some of the flicker examples you're talking about were so subtle that, they were almost invisible to the naked eye, but you had to really tune in on them. And Chris on the truck was so great at finding that stuff and just troubleshooting all that.
And Gautam was fantastic. And Gautam, Pinto, we've got to put a shout out.
Oh my God, yeah.
On the
and he also did such a ton of legwork to get the data workflow to work. Like, he basically retooled the existing workflow for the 65 in a way that economized it a little more and streamlined it a little more, so we could make this work and make this palatable for post and make this palatable for the producers. So that, it just made it that much easier. And him and Chris were such a great combo. In terms of Chris's world, obviously, once we started rolling on action sequences and shooting high frame rates and things, Chris's days got a little longer. He said, but the workflow that they'd created, I'm still amazed how he was able to keep up, given, we had some 3 camera days with action sequences and things, and, pretty heavy workflow for them. And they still pull it off.
No, it did. And then we got very familiar with false color. You spent a lot of time with false color.
Yes.
Looking for flickers.
Yes.
Even the tiniest ones, you've really got to look hard. And Gautam was on it, because something that we just don't have the time to do. So I think it adds to Gautam's workload.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we just got into a regime of just checking everything.
Yeah, and he had such an eagle eye for that. He'd be checking it while we're out lighting, and he'd be troubleshooting all that, working with Terry Banting, the gaffer, and the whole lighting team. And it was a great group of people. And it was amazing. One of the things I love about it was that the 65 sort of sharpens everybody's game, like everybody becomes that much more diligent and that much more vigilant about everything, because there is nowhere to hide with this camera. It's like, it's all there.
Yeah, it's all there.
Warts and all.
And is it worth, should we look at some more pics to give examples of the 65?
For sure. Yeah, there's some questions here, but I think looking at stills in relation to the questions are probably the best way to go.
Yeah, but I think the question about the 65 giving you more boldness with the darkness from John, definitely the 65 just seems to have more latitude. Mm-hmm. It seems to have a little bit more detail in the shadows and definitely detail in the highlights. And I think it's just because of the size of the detail.
Yeah, I think there's just so much information there that it's digging into the shadows. I mean, I've got an image here that I've always loved as an example of how kind of subtle and nuanced you can be with the tonal differences. Let me just bring this up. Where things don't get muddy, where you might expect things to get muddy. You got an image like this. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Where you've got, there's not a huge range of tonal differences, but it still has depth and texture because the sensor's digging into all of that information. All these little subtle gradations, all these textures, like all this beautiful scenic work on the walls. Even though that's falling off substantially, it's all still there.
Yeah.
And also the beautiful way the focus falls off, where you can create these layers of dimension in the focus, where, it's not like that sort of two-dimensional fall off where it's like there's one thing in focus and then everything else is soft. You get these layers going. I just love it. Like it's, you can also create dynamics in the frame that way too.
Yeah.
Because there's this image, which is a tighter version of that, where you've got, the way this focus is falling off and how you can kind of separate the characters. You can still read what's going on in Luther's face. Like it's falling away, but it's not like mush. It's just so great. And, and just the way that sensor's digging into all of those little nuanced details. It's just so great.
Joel Bogdanovich did such a great job.
Oh, incredible.
Creating our kind of show LUTs, and I really enjoyed, the kind of, it was before, working with Joel, with Gautam, yourself, to kind of create the show LUT was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the LUT itself was beautiful because everything just kind of hit the pocket, once we started to dig into it a little more and, building more sets for the show, everyone started to tune into the notion of what this camera can do and then what the LUT looks like. And everything just became cumulative, which is kind of the ultimate situation where things just keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
Once everyone piles on, it's great.
We've got a question asking about whether we did HDR or SDR first, but it was HDR we did first, which seemed to benefit the workflow. And then we basically, we graded HDR, and then there was another pass done on SDR afterwards. But, all our time was spent on that HDR grade.
Yeah.
And it does change the way we kind of light a little bit. You just become more aware of your high ends and your low ends. And again, that's Gautam and his false colors again. I think he would be the HDR police. Where he's like, are you sure you want to let that one go?
Yeah, he was always. I always loved his approach because it was sort of like, well, it's your funeral, that's was kind of but I know that he was, he was very protective of it, and he was also great because this was my first HDR show, and finding that balance where you're not sort of bringing everything into too tight a tonal range, so you can still keep the dynamics of it, but make sure that you have everything. And he also, I was never one for kind of sliding the ISO around to kind of compensate for that. But he kind of broke me down and said, I still call it his sorcery. Like, are you doing your sorcery on this?
I know. He did the same with me. And I became a convert.
Me too, completely. And,
constantly changing our ISOs.
Yeah. And, and just that yeah, understanding, of course, that all you're really doing on digital is kind of sliding the scale up and down. You're not really expanding your latitude. You're just picking what to optimize. But he was so great about, kind of finding that sweet spot where you'd have a negative that would have everything, and then you go into the grade and it's all there.
No, I remember, I remember grading pilots like in 2 days. And then on this, we graded the pilot in 1 day. And then on season 2, which we can't talk about, we graded the pilot like in sort of 6 hours. Because all the work's been done.
Mm-hmm.
And all that information is there.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's incredible. I mean, between, Gautam and Jill, the grading on the first season was so seamless. And, you'd find yourself kind of making notes just for the sake of making notes because there's nothing to say. It's like, this is perfect. And, I thought it was such a great team. And it was a complex LUT, but at the same time, it was kind of straightforward in terms of, in our world, it was straightforward. On other sets, it might have been more complex, but it just put everything in the pocket, and it was just like a beautiful film stock. I loved it.
Yeah, no, and it was unique. And I think at the end of the day, when you've got that level of high-end collaboration, when you've got, when you're working with Gautam, when you're working with Jill, when I'm working with yourself, when I'm working with, Everett on VFX, all these people who just would die for the picture, end up making something that is just way, way above everything else. And I think that paid off. We were the second highest viewed drama on Netflix.
Right.
Stranger Things was the highest, and we were number 2. So I think it kind of pays off.
Yeah, indeed. We have a question from Doug here about the LED flicker. He asked, when we say flicker, do we mean LED lights or just art department practicals with LEDs in? And we actually saw a flicker in, tungsten practicals, and not so much. I mean, some of the LED stuff that, that wasn't technically film lights, I think we had problems with, but tungsten practicals were really problematic.
And you wouldn't expect it from tungsten.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the odd little LED. Do you remember, I don't want to name manufacturers, but there was just things you wouldn't expect it to come from.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's just by virtue of the camera just having so much more resolution and so much more clarity that, something that might have gotten lost on a conventional sensor might have shown up on this one.
Yeah.
And then Rod was asking, how does false color help find flicker? It's just by seeing the subtle variations in level.
Yeah, you're just reducing it to just simple colors.
Yeah. And Gautam, I mean, I don't want to, potentially infringe on his patent, but he created that LUT for season 2. That was the flicker LUT. And it was just incredible. I don't know how he built it, but it was essentially like false color 2.0 that enabled you to see like the most subtle variation in luminance level that really picked out that was invaluable.
Yeah, no, that was one of gold.
And I know he always took great pride in saying there's flicker there, and you're like, what? And then he turns it on and it's there, and you're like, he's a genius. He's a mad genius.
But I think that LUT became our HDR monitor. Essentially,
basically.
Yeah, no, that you're catching stuff that HDR was seeing that we could.
Yeah, no, it was invaluable, and we had various names for it, but I won't say any more until his patent goes through. And there's a question from Falana, hope I'm pronouncing that properly, about comparing the 65 with the Sony Venice. You worked with the Venice, and so the project that I was on when I got shut down was the Venice, and you worked with it as well, right?
I'd say the Venice is more like the LF.
Yes,
so the Venice and the LF are very similar, and I think it's very subjective which one you prefer. Mm-hmm. It's kind of apples or oranges. They're very similar animals, and I have a slight Ari bent, and that's the way I think my kind of subjective color tastes and my kind of cinematic tastes work.
Yeah, there's definitely different color science going on.
Yeah,
and the sensors are different, but in terms of the compare, I mean, to be honest, nothing compares to the 65 just by virtue of the sensor size.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's basically 3 sensors stitched together just gives you so much more to work with. There's really nothing that compares. But the Venice, is more of it's more a comparison to the LF, I'd say.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the Venice. The Venice is a great camera.
Oh, me too. Admittedly, I've never been a huge Sony fan, but the Venice converted me, and
yeah,
it's I was having fun with it, and hopefully get back to it as soon as I can.
But yeah, you're right. It's not. I think you can compare it to the LF, but not to the 65.
Yeah,
it's
a different animal. We were talking about the kind of getting everyone's head wrapped around how this works. I know for the operators, it was a transition in terms of understanding, like when you put up a 25, what does a 25 mean in 65 world versus what a 25, what they're accustomed to. So you kind of have to recalibrate your head and your eye to what these lenses now mean. So if we're talking about a 25, and I mean, I know I found Artemis Pro to be invaluable in sort of recalibrating my head, and it became a very valuable tool to just work with the operators to get a sense of, what we wanted to see in the frame and get the common language of what these lenses were. I've got a couple Artemis pictures here, and I know you do as well. Let me just bring these up.
We've just got a question from Kim Miles asking about the HDE, which we did use for season 2, but it wasn't, that technology wasn't available for season 1.
Right.
For season 2, we used the HDE, which was a huge cost saving. I think it was like a kind of 40% reduction in data, which again makes everybody very happy.
Yeah, just makes it that much easier for everyone to manage. Let me bring this up here. Wrong one, hang on. Let me get myself organized, I'll bring this up. But yeah, I mean, Artemis Pro has always been a great tool, but I think on a show like this, where you really do have to kind of recalibrate your head to work with the 65, it just became that sort of common ground kind of tool that would enable people to kind of, because new directors as well, like they had to kind of retool their mind about what
because a 25
what these lenses mean
is equivalent to like is that 17 or something, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like between 17 and 18.
Yeah.
So it requires a completely different mindset, and so you lose some of that common language that you'd have with a director, where you'd talk to the operator and say, like, put this lens up, and they'd go, what? You're putting up a 35? I thought we wanted a wider perspective. And then you realize like a 35 is a wider perspective when you're talking about the 65. So, but I know that it's a pretty quick adjustment, and the directors really get on side with it, and they just really start to appreciate what it has to offer. But here's can you see that?
Yep.
Like that's Ellen Kuras, one of our wonderful directors. And she's actually talking to the actor here, and I was just working out the angles, but this was where I was sizing up a 35, and then the end image was that. So, in terms of thinking what a 35 is, that's not necessarily what you'd think a 35 would be.
Yeah.
In terms of conventional. So I found it really valuable to just take these images and then show the director and say, okay, here's what a 35 is to us. And then, you realize, and when you bring it up, you get, this great sense of presence, but that beautiful fall off where, you can see like even, where the focus pullers are earning their money here, where, it's like the focal point is
that little slither of focus.
Yeah, but it's so great. And just, I love the sense of presence these lenses give you. And you can see like we're getting that sort of natural vignetting off the Canons that we sort of got used to. I mean, it took me a while to wrap my head around, but I found that you actually start kind of using the vignette, the natural vignetting of those lenses, because kind of becomes free. Save yourself some time in the grade.
Yeah, no, exactly. A free vignette.
Yeah, and then did you use Artemis a lot as well?
Yeah, I think it's because one of the problems was they didn't have a viewfinder when we were doing season 1 that could work for the 65, an optical one. So Artemis was our go-to, and unfortunately the iPhone 11 hadn't been invented at that point with the extra wide-angle lens. Now with the iPhone 11, it's phenomenal. You can do everything.
Yeah, you can see everything.
Whereas before you had to just imagine a little bit what the edges were around the edges.
Yeah, there's lots of explaining to do.
Exactly, yeah.
But what other... Sorry, go ahead.
On you.
No, I was just saying, what else did you find was a kind of learning curve or transition for people to get used to the 65, like apart from the obvious, the lens difference thing?
I think it's obviously it's a bigger beast. You've got to kind of think about, will it fit into the the mounts and all your kind of grippage, because a few times we got caught out with making sure the heads could take the extra width of the camera. Right. So I think you can't presume it's just another camera.
In some ways, it almost took me back to like shooting with like a 535 or something. It felt that same, like go back to working with that sort of technology. Kind of was a good starting point to think about how to handle remote heads, mounts.
And because gimbals, we couldn't use it on any gimbals or anything because it's just too heavy.
Yeah.
And luckily now the Mini LF is around, so you can essentially use all your gimbals now with the combination of a Mini LF and your 65 as your A and B camera.
Yeah, such a game changer. I mean, when I did Tallgrass, we used the LF, and we shot some on the Ronin too, and we were just maxing out the Ronin. Like you could just hear the gimbals crying the whole time. Yeah. You had a filter and all of a sudden you're screwed, you sort of have to. So it was, the LF's a game changer for sure. But it is, you do have to kind of go back to thinking like you're using a big beast of a film camera.
Yeah. But you're right, everybody respects it and everybody ups their game.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, you just have to reboot your head a little bit, but what you gain is far more than anything you lose. And I don't feel we lost a lot in process in terms of how we shoot. I mean, granted, Umbrella is a little more structured show in terms of how we shoot. It's like a little less handheld. We're fairly specific in terms of how we use the camera. So the 65 was a good match that way. It wouldn't, if you're going to do a full handheld show, it might not be
your
best solution.
Yeah, no, exactly. Is it worth? Should we look at some more stills? Because I think, going back to the 25mm lens, which just became, it was the 25 and the 35 became our kind of go-tos.
Yeah.
Let me just find the file.
There was one question we didn't get to as well. Justin asked about blue fringing around highlight contrast. Example, backlit, bright windows, and frame. Did we find that these types of lens aberrations are amplified with the 65 versus Super 35?
I think we kind of almost ended up looking for a bit of blue in our, I think we very deliberately had a kind of blue fill light for a lot of the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, and I found that the lens aberrations, because it's such a smooth image to begin with, the lens aberrations were, you didn't feel those harsh transitions as much. I felt like it was much more inherent to the image. Yeah.
Now, are you seeing that?
I'm seeing that. Yeah.
So this is your 25mm lens, which the fall off is just insane. This is in our apocalypse scene. So it's still an intimate lens, but it's still wide and it's seeing so much of the world, and not anamorphic.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that blew me away about it was, you'd think obviously the 65 is an obvious choice for sense of scope and scale, but it's incredible how intimate it is.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is intimate, and I think this, even at this, width, there's still a little bit of fall off, coming from here, to
Mhm.
there, and then it starts to get, the whole world becomes into focus for our final kind of wide.
But
I think going all that
even
way
that is
back,
so great as as a sense of revelation, the sense that you get the sort of world sharpening up. I mean, which happens naturally with optics, but there's an exaggerated quality to this that just makes it so textural.
yeah, I think there's a lone focus puller out there.
Yes, there's Mr. Marks here. You can see the sweat on his brow from there, I think.
Yeah, and here's the man of the moment. This is
Yes.
the effects supervisor Everett, who's phenomenal.
Yeah, incredible. And
I'd
really, again,
we'd
understood.
all be lost without him.
Yeah, and he was such a good ally to have, in preserving the scope and scale of the show, because, he wasn't, he was always on board, and he was always like, no, we'll figure out a way to do it. He didn't ever want to, he knew what this camera was capable of, and he supported what we wanted to do with it, and didn't, wasn't interested in kind of choking things down and making things smaller. He was always like, no, it's got to be epic. It's got to be epic.
And he was pushing us. And that's why, he was definitely, look, how can we make this better?
Yeah, exactly.
And again,
that's a beautiful image.
Another 25 coming down the corridor, which are my favorite little drawings. and then entering the room. There's still the same lens. And then you start to see a little bit of fall off behind him. And then you're into, this is an emotional moment for him. And you can take it all the way to there. So you can, I think that's what worked well in Umbrella Academy. Camera could keep moving and moving.
Mm-hmm. And you see even that end frame, you don't feel the lens there.
No.
You're obviously very close to him and there's a very intimate image, but you're not starting to feel the optics, which is always what I've loved about it, is that there's sort of nothing that's tipping our hand that, that there's a camera shooting this, the audience can get fully buried in the story.
Yeah.
And they don't ever sense, the fingerprints of us at work.
And the same with this, just, the scale of this, and you could look at that image, forever. It's stunning. I love it.
And you see it, like we were talking about earlier, how, the little textures that was put into the set, even the little color variations on the pillars, which is very subtle, but the 65 still digs it out, even though it's falling away on the right side there.
Yeah.
You're still feeling like that, the veins in the marbling and, even the aging they did, even though the set was fairly pristine, there was really subtle scenic work being done that you don't really see it, you just feel it, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah. And then this is going back to seeing up top. We created our big light boxes with all the kind of the kind of ceiling lights, so we could control them. We had sky panels up there, and then I'll show you later on. We would put in big silks to kind of soften them even more when we were doing kind of group work.
Yeah, and those, I remember our phone conversation about those skylights, and just reinforcing how important they were to be able to have the set be turnkey. And those, and just having sky panels up there, it just made everything so easy. And especially with our LUT, because once we start playing around with color temperature variations and also gel choices and gel emulations, you could find some really magical formulas with those the skylights, just to offset
and just keeping all the
counterpoint what you're doing through the windows.
Keeping all the
just bringing out the texture of so great.
No, I love it. To have a 360 set, and it kind of that's what I kind of for the whole world was to be 360, which made Terry Banting's life hell, and I'm sure he cursed me at the end of every day. But I think it just gave the show a feel that this is a real place, even though it's a graphic novel. Because at the end of the day, that's the big struggle. You're trying to create a world where there's a talking monkey and a man who's half silverback gorilla to be convincing and real and plausible. And I think if you can fight it and make it feel as real as possible, then the viewers jump in with you and you're up and away.
Exactly. And I think that's the beautiful balance that you struck in the pilot was finding that tightrope walk between having it feel like a real world, but also having it have a heightened graphic quality that kept it, sort of paid homage to the graphic novel aspect of it without it becoming a pure graphic novel, where it still felt like a world that could exist in reality, but it's just that slightly heightened version of it that made it aspirational for the audience, where it's like, oh, I'm not just watching reality, I'm watching something that's something other.
Yeah, this is one of my other favorite sets. It was Gritty's, and this was our original plan, kind of concept art. And we were looking at it, and I kind of I think I fell out with the set deck where I suggested that all the ceiling lights, all the ceiling squares should be a ceiling light. And I think, again, Terry kind of keeled over. And this is what we got.
Yeah, but look what you get. I mean, come on.
Which I think just adds to their world. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, and that I remember watching the dailies for when you were shooting the pilot, and the dailies from the Gritties with the Fives battle. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, and then, once Steve put the They Might Be Giants track on it, I'm like, okay, come on. Is that Gritties?
That's Gritties. That's what goes in behind the scenes to make all those lights work. They were all crammed into the corners. So, and then it pays off, because you just got that kind of light depth everywhere. And this is a great example of why the 65.
Yeah, it's all there.
It's all there, and it's a polish, but it's not shiny.
Exactly.
It's not film, but it's not digital either.
Yeah, it's definitely its own thing.
And I think it's subjective, but that's why I love, and that an ARRI sort of cinematic color science on skin tones, I think is just superb. And I think that's a kind of great example of it. Yeah,
and the color science for the 65 was different than the Alexa Mini as well. Like they've obviously done some very specific work on it, because it seemed to augment and improve on the best qualities of the camera. Because I know when we brought the LF in, we noticed a big difference between the two color sciences, and it was tough to get the LF, at least the first generation LF, into a sweet spot that felt like the 65.
But again, this is a kind of good example of us trying to do minimal floor lighting. I think we could put wrap lights when required, and maybe push a little boost of the key. But here I had windows reflecting everything, so I had to be really careful what I could put on the floor. So again, and then the camera's moving 360 so often. And that went into a lot of the designing of the sets. But again, just such a gorgeous lens, I know I found myself, lighting from largely outside the sets and then just wrapping from inside, or, picking out eyes or something. And, there was very little in terms of big rigs inside. I don't remember doing much of anything. I think, there was such a unified approach even when we're building new sets, to try and keep as many sources available to us that enabled us to, be outside the set with the lighting, which gave us freedom. And I've always preferred a set with fewer lights inside. It just feels more like a real world then. Yeah, no, completely. And this is an example of our interactive VFX. So the Gritty's sign is a donut being kind of dumped into a cup, isn't it? So that these lights were flashing away as if it was a neon light, which VFX would add in later. And I found the conversations with VisFX were so great, because it was sort of a holistic conversation. It was always about what the story needed to be and what the image wanted to be, and then we kind of figure it out from there. And Everett and his team were always so open. That's a beautiful image. Look at that. That's when before he's about to disappear, where he takes them all out one by one. And the lights were flashing away because somebody shoots out the lights and everything fuses. So with the flashing lights, with the music, with the gunfire, with him kind of blipping about the place. Yeah, you used some great handheld in that sequence too, I remember. And I mean, that was a very elaborate sequence, and it's safe to say that you wouldn't have got that work done if you hadn't put all that time into making the set as turnkey as possible, so that you didn't have to spend time moving gear around. And no, completely. Yeah. I think a lot of people were cursing us, but I think it paid off in the end. And then this is what we, you know, all the studios, Netflix, everybody loved this when we kind of, the intro to the world on a 65, because it's just that wide kind of epicness and the kind of fall off.
That's one thing I was really taken with. Oh, I'm told that Zoom is frozen. We're supposed to pause for a moment.
Ah.
Christina has given us a heads up. I don't know if we should play some hold music, or maybe this is the time for that song we talked about.
I know. So.
Okay, I'll just let her know we've stopped. Okay, she says we're back. So we're back.
So when did we disappear? Well, let's start from the door.
Yeah, maybe start from the door, because that was...
because that's coming in. This is the first time we see the Academy in the pilot. And it just had to have a kind of wow moment of, this is the world that she grew up in and she's coming back to.
Mm-hmm. I love this sequence. When I was watching the dailies, I remember just marveling at the world was being revealed to us, and that all through the pilot, the way, you know, that we were being presented with what the Umbrella Academy itself is, the building, and then also what the show is. And you really, it was fantastic. Like, it was just so,
And
it was
the
such a fun journey to take.
I love the mum when she's a robot. Spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's seen the mum. That's safe. But just the kind of quality of the skin is fantastic on the 65.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just all those pixels at work just to create that creamy, smooth image.
But again, fantastic set building. Just it's like a frame within a frame within a frame, and then there is a frame.
Yeah, and so much beautiful reflectivity in the, you know, the paint finishes. You know, everything had texture to it, whether it was a scenic painting texture or whether it was just a reflective surface that grabbed the light and pushed it back. There was always something. Like, there wasn't a dead surface in the whole place, and it's just so great.
And it's that kind of half shaft of light which I love. Do you know what I mean? So it's because you're on a thin line of it becoming too theatrical, you know, of believability, and becoming too aware of yourself.
Yeah, which was always a line to walk on the show, you know, when, because you know, let's be honest, there's a lot of superhero shows out there, and it's a matter of finding something different and finding something that, you know, feels right for this show, so it doesn't feel like, you know, we're leaning into cliches or tropes too much, because, you know, this show was its own thing. And I
think this is kind of going back to the original idea of kind of Tushman with his kind of artwork. This is us achieving what we, you know, promised to achieve.
Definitely. And Cody is asking, it's the perfect time to ask this question, which lights were outside the windows in the Academy?
That we had about 8 mole beams, I think, and we had about, I've got a photograph which is coming up soon, which shows what was outside. So we had about, I think, sort of 8 5Ks, wasn't it?
Yeah, that sounds right.
We had about 8 mole beams, and then we probably had about 20 sky panels as well. That was, and just
the sky panels largely worked in the upper levels.
They were that level, and then we had
windows some life.
3 soft boxes up top as well, which we kind of kept at a cooler level. And in fact, that's only 8 mole beams down one side, and we used probably about 10 mole beams in total.
I think we had 10 or 12, if memory serves, but and they were always dancing around, and, you know, it was always Terry and his team, Terry Banting, our gaffer, and his team were great at dancing those around. And I found that the lighting team really came to master the mole beams in terms of knowing how to use them. And
no, completely, they really could find the skip.
Because they're different. They're a different animal to work with.
You can see it here on Ellen. You know, that's coming off the floor. you know, and that's what we try to keep, as much of that real world coming in. And again, I've got to thank production, because I remember when I kind of put my lighting list in, and they went, "How many mole beams?" You know, and they, you know, and they went with me, and I just said, "Trust me, it's gonna look fantastic. It's gonna create a world that no one's ever seen." And they bought into it, and they delivered and gave us what we needed, and you know, thankfully, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the signature elements of the show, and it's something that we used elsewhere as well. I mean, I think largely a lot of the Umbrella Academy work involved the mole beams, but we didn't take them on the road that much, at least on my episodes. But you know, every set we shot, they sort of became one of the signature elements within, you know, the Umbrella world and the kids world.
And here's Ken Hall, who was our fantastic kind of pogo, so that he could. He essentially was pogo, so he could interact with Ellen. Yeah, and that's our kind of our empty frame. And there's pogo. So they would have a reference headshot just for Weta to use. And there's Everett in there, and we'd run 2 witness cameras as well at the same time. So we'd basically be covering 2 additional angles anytime we're doing any pogo work. And again, this all had to be 4K. I think we started off with Sony 55s, didn't we? And then they moved to Blackmagic cameras, I think, for season 2. But so, you know, it got a very busy floor when you're shooting pogo stuff. Essentially, you had 4, if not 5 cameras on the floor, and everybody trying to squeeze into the same kind of real estate.
But I was, you know, when I was given the brief on how to handle the pogo work, I hadn't done any of this motion capture kind of work before, and you know, I was like, oh man, this just sounds like it's going to really bog us down. But Everett and his team made it really seamless. Like, I was always amazed at how it didn't really affect anything we did.
No?
I mean, obviously we had to talk about it and be specific about what we needed because it was such an expensive effect, but they made it so easy.
But yeah, no, they were brilliant. And I don't know what Everett said to his crew, because they were never in the way.
Yeah, it's true.
They were never in the way. And I always expected them to be in the way. So they were fantastic.
There's a great example of the skylights at work on Ellen's hair there, you know, just providing that little bit of cool counterpoint to the warm windows. Beautiful.
And it just meant that we had all this complete control, because I think, as we all know, when we're in episodic television, you've got to make your days, you know, you've got to be able to complete. So you have to design your lighting systems that can be fast as well as high quality.
And flexible, you know, like there was so many things we could do with that set, just by virtue of, you know, the flexibility built into it. Here's a good example where you've got a very different vibe there in terms of color temperature, and the general feel of that shot is very different than the pogo scene.
Yeah. And there's our pogo.
I thought it was great how much of Ken was in pogo. When I saw the final pogo character, there was a lot of Ken in it, and I thought that was really beautiful. That, you know, because he was such a pro all season.
Oh, he was fantastic.
You know, yeah, just giving it his all, even though he knows he's going to be covered up with, you know, with a virtual character. But you know, I was really touched by how much of the character was Ken. It was great.
But this is one of my favorite shots in season 1, where we would just literally just tip up the moles. So the moles that previously had been skimming and hitting the floor, as the cameras come back, the moles just tip up a little bit higher to get a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? To just get more.
Yeah, and it was just a matter of like 2 degrees, and that's where the lamp ops were so great. Was they understood that the mole beams? It's like painting with a fine brush. You know, you got to be very subtle with the adjustments, and they really figured it out.
Yeah, lots of whoa. Yeah. And there's a kind of lovely wide, the Pete Sweeney shot.
And that's a good example of, you know, if we'd have gone 239, that would have been a different shot altogether.
Yeah, yes.
You know, that.
Yeah. Because
you would have lost that sense of dimension.
Yeah. And again, just the kind of selective focus here is stunning.
And those strong uses of color that we talked about in prep, you know, just when appropriate, and to create this world that felt like it was a heightened version, especially Klaus's world. I thought the work you did on the pilot with Klaus's world was great in terms of establishing that his world could be a little different.
Yeah. But that's a 35 mil, which feels like a 50, that kind of close focus.
Mm-hmm. And but with that intimacy.
This is a 25 that feels like a 35. And then this is more, I put these in so I could show you the 14. Mm-hmm. So every now and again, we'd pull it out of the bag and chuck in our 14. And
I've got some images of the 14 on the umbrella sets. I'll show you that.
Yeah, that just kind of, they're very kind of quirky, but I think we could get away with it.
Yeah, again, it was that the show gave us, at least I felt it gave us the license to play these flourishes without feeling like we're bumping out of the world.
Yeah, and then this is the kind of kids.
And it just hit that graphic novel quality.
Again, there's no lights. Everything is lit by lights on the floor. So everything's outside. And it gives the actors
That's a great set
to kind of move around. It just makes your gaffer's life hell. But because they're just constantly having to make sure everything's in the right place and everything's set properly. Mm-hmm. But I think it really does pay off.
Well, that's where having a great board op makes all the difference.
Yeah. And again, this is just the joy of the 65. And that group shot, it was a great one of why we didn't go anamorphic. We had to kind of cater for all sizes.
Yeah. Yeah, the sense of scope, especially with the Luther character, I found that the 65 just enabled us to make Luther, like with a staging like this where you could place him ahead of other characters, you can really give him that presence that he needed, where he felt like he was a character that was not altogether human.
Sure. Now, shall I show some of the kind of behind the scenes stuff?
Sure.
Let me just
see if we have any questions here. The set build pictures you have are great because it's we got a question from Kristen asking, did we have any supportive units on set for foreground close-ups in terms of diffusion and build? That's mainly the book lights, I think, where we would I largely use book lights just to wrap what was coming in, or pick out the eyes, or just shape a face a little bit. I know for me, I was mainly using books on set, not so much as a key as much as a wrap, just to,
or even just a tiny little LED kind of wrap light. What were Terry's homemade LED lights? What did we call them again? They were fantastic.
Yeah, they were great. I can't remember. It was like the Depron LED.
Yeah.
They didn't weigh anything. You could throw them anywhere.
And we just chucked them up, and we had them all sizes. So if you needed a slightly bigger wrap on a face, we would chuck them up quick and easy. But this is the Umbrella Academy being built. This is the hallway, which you've just seen that entrance shot. So this is kind of literally in its early stages. And then this is Steve Blackman and Peter Hoare and Tim Singh.
Are you sharing? I'm not seeing it.
Oh, you're not seeing this? Let me go back. So, let me see. Let me get rid of that one. So what are you seeing at the moment?
I'm seeing you.
Let me share. Let's see it. I'll try again. Desktop. Okay.
There you go. There's your desktop.
And here we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, second time lucky. So take two. So yeah, here we go. Here's the Umbrella Academy being built in its early stages. That's the hallway you just saw Ellen walk into, taken from up top. And this is that shot of Pogo and Ellen standing in the hallway about to leave, before it was built. Mm-hmm. And here's Steve Blackman and Peter Hoare and Tim Singh. discussing a shot in the kids' hallway. And here's Jeff King, the man who said yes to all beans. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
And Richard, our grip, who was fantastic for making our spinning rigs and everything, but we'll show that later. And there's our camera crew. So there's Pete Sweeney and David Nardi. This is B camera at the Russian swimming pool. They got fantastic shots.
That's a great sequence.
And this is our crane and our Cineflex that's dipping in the water. So we had I think I had about 6, maybe 8 kind of IMAXs outside there, because we really pumped that full of lights. And we were losing lights, like at late afternoon. So we had to kind of maintain that quality. And there's the man in the moment, Terry Banting. So that's Terry and myself. And then here's the kind of wide shot of all the IMAXs coming in. And we had, I think we had M90s up top on the left-hand side coming in. And this is obviously from the crane. And then this is from Pete's shots. Love these ones.
That's great.
And then this is the apocalypse. So this is in episode, I think it's episode 2, when number 5 runs out to kind of prove that he can do his own thing, and he disappears into the apocalypse. So this was the road in Hamilton that basically that's the world that we remade on the backlot, and he's stuck in the apocalypse for that moment there. But that worked so well. That's one of my favorite scenes. And then this is, everybody in Toronto will recognize this. This is a snowy day. So this is what you're kind of up against when you're doing location filming. So you've got all hell breaking outside, and you've got to maintain calm and normality on the sets. So what I like to do was I actually used the mole. You see a mole beam there in the middle. So I would use, your 18Ks, and I would sneak in mole beams kind of underneath, just to kind of break up the kind of color. So it's generally cool, but there's a little bit of warmth kind of hitting the desk and kind of mixing the two lights together.
Yeah, I remember asking you about that when I visited the set, because I saw that you were mixing things up, and it was a really nice, just very subtle. But again, the 65 picks up these little nuances, so you get that. Nothing gets lost.
Yeah, and you can see it there just on our hair. You can see the kind of the coolness, and then the kind of a little tiny warmth, and you can see it on the window. Otherwise, I think it all gets too kind of cold. I'm a big fan of layering all your lights.
Yeah, me too.
Again, Terry used to always hate me because actually it wasn't Terry, it was Richard always hated me because I'd always be changing my gels. I'd be like going from, a half to a full to a quarter to an 8. So,
oh, good. It wasn't just me then. Okay, good.
And that's the kind of world you can see that little hint of warmth that it's not too aware of itself. With the kind of cool backlight.
Just got a couple questions here. Ali's asking how involved we are with color palette and storyboarding. I'd say, very involved. I know that I was always all over them about palette. Yeah,
palette. We kind of did that in the early stages with the kind of the LUT we're building and all the colors in that kind of pitch. And the storyboarding, we tended to storyboard all the big stunt sequences to within an inch of their life, so everybody knew exactly what was going on.
And Viz effects heavy work as well.
Yeah, anytime. So everybody's on the same, on the same plan.
And Cody's asking if light boxes are something we like to bring in often when working in a pre-built set.
Yeah, I think the biggest arguments I'd have with kind of art department was whether I could put an integrated light box into the set. I remember I wanted to, the playroom was the one I lost. I wanted to put glass bricks in the middle as if there was another level, but I could see that logistically it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I remember that conversation because you called me to tell me that you lost that battle, and and we just had to find another way.
So we just ended up putting more practicals in. And I think at the end of the day, you know what trouble you're going to get into. So I think we always try and find a way to integrate softboxes into the set. But sometimes, and rightly so, the art department have to say that's just madness, and I don't think we can get away with it. You know. So.
Yeah, and that's where the lensing of the 65 makes a big difference too, because there's, you know, with the field of view of these lenses, it's much harder to hide gear. So it's pretty essential to integrate.
And there's our mole beams there in the kids' playroom. So we'd use moonlight. We use the celebs for moonlight, and then use the mole beams. And then these gels would be Robertson blue. I used a lot of, which is like a kind of 3/4 blue, and it's a very kind of cool, kind of grayish kind of blue. That I love it.
Yeah, it's different than CTB. That's the first time I'd worked with it, and I loved it because it was just a little off CTB.
And it was fantastic. So I'd kind of layer it, so it was kind of full Robertson, maybe like a kind of a half blue, a quarter blue, and an eighth blue. And then you can see the effects that it's all doing. And this was the pilot shot of Robert on the table. And then, so this is a good example of that's the world we're in, of reality, and then that's the end results.
Yeah. Simplicity is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. So there's nothing on the floor. And again, because our cameras are moving 360, it just makes everything so much easier. And this is a great sort of 25 mil, get the group. Everybody's in the frame. And then the subtleties of the 65 as well on skin. Again, this is another one. I think it's just stunning. But again, this was such a great set. I mean, Mark and Jim Lambie. Jim Lambie did a fantastic job dressing all this.
Yeah, that great anachronistic dressing where you never really know what time frame you're in because there's no consistencies, you know. But Jim, stuff from every generation.
Jim and his guys nailed it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And we must say that, you know, Mark Warrington started off, he did the pilot, and then Mark Steele took over, and he did a phenomenal job. It was just seamless.
Yeah, it's a challenging show because every script is essentially its own thing. You know, we obviously spent time in the Academy sets, but you know, we spent a lot of time on the road as well, and trying to find sets that kind of fit in our world. You know, that still felt like umbrella sets. You know, because I found that once we left the confines of Mark's sets, it was much more challenging to find kind of an umbrella version of the real world. Yeah.
And this is a good example of Pete Sweeney doing what he does best, all that lovely kind of foreground focus. I said, Pete, just give me as much foreground randomness as you possibly can. So he delivered.
Does he bring all that with him?
I think.
I don't remember seeing the briefcase full of glass bottles before. That's great.
Yeah, and this was A camera, and then you'll see B coming around the side, and this is we haven't really shown much of the 50. This is a 50 mil, 50 mil in closer, and just the only thing in focus essentially is just that little line of focus down the eye and the cheek.
Yeah, and Mark and David, the focus pullers, were such great storytellers in terms of the choices they made with focus too, because it's, you know, when we're on the fly, it's all them making the choices, and they were so intuitive in terms of their story choices.
Yeah, and there's Pete with his full selection.
Yes, the full bar.
And there you go, and that's what delivered, which was gorgeous.
Nice.
And again, just that gorgeous world. And then here we go. I think somebody was asking if we had any photos outside the set. This is inside the living room Academy set. So you can see all the mole beams lined up there, and then all our tungstens there, and all our sky panels up top. And that's what you get.
Dan is asking what stop we like to shoot at.
We'd kind of be round about sort of 2, you know, sometimes I'd always say to the focus pullers, if you need it, always say. you know. But I think a lot of the time you're sitting around two, and sometimes you go fully open to you know, when you need to.
Yeah. There's I think I maybe went to like 2.8 or 4 once in a while, just to, if we were in a group shot and it felt like we were being too choosy with the focus.
Yeah, but definitely sometimes when you're close, you'd end up going back to 2.8 because it just got too, you felt like the head was popping out a bit too much when you're close.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always loved the layers of focus you get when you're not wide open. You know, you get those sort of focus working in multiple layers versus that kind of one-dimensional focus that wide open can sometimes give you.
And there's, you know, it'd either be a light grid or a full grid up top, just to soften that top light. You know, you saw the shots that we did of Ellen earlier, and then you can see the negatives, just a ton of floppies coming in just as required. And that's your, you know, the skipping coming off the floor. You can see the mold beams coming in here, gives you that effect here. And then the top light with the diffusion just softened.
Yeah, those sets, it was so easy to make the images cohesive in those sets in terms of feeling like it did have that authenticity, but still felt interesting. You know, it wasn't like shooting a documentary by any stretch. And there's Gilles Courbet, our A operator.
Yeah, no, he did a fantastic. He had a fantastic eye, Gilles. He really did.
Yeah, he really understood how to use those wide lenses, because it is an acquired taste. Like, you have to kind of wrap your head around how to use these lenses.
No. And he, every time he got the composition bang on. And he, you know, it gave the kind of the style of the show. But, you know, that kind of skipping you can see just in that Tom's feet gives you that kind of, you can see it there kind of coming across.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing that, you know, I think both of us share a love of mixed color temperatures, and the sets really lent themselves well to that as well. I know that I was constantly writing the color temperatures on the camera, and just anytime we didn't have a mixed feel going on, it just didn't feel like the show anymore. So, you know, it was such a huge part of the show. And then Jill, the colorist, really understood how to use that and how to augment it and put it all in the pocket.
And just the loveliness of, you know, I think, you know, Robert was moving around a lot as his character. He could just come and go where you could let Robert go anywhere he wanted.
Which he loved, because he's such an intuitive.
Joy of not having to say to an actor, "Can you please hit your mark?" You know, which a lot of the time they have to, but most of the time when they're in their big group dynamics, you could just let them kind of roam. In this kind of thing.
Klaus doesn't really believe in marks.
yeah. And then again, another Pete Sweeney shot, kind of top shot. And this is back in our world. And that is literally, you know, you can see there's not much change in the lighting on the wide. So when we come in for the close-up, you maybe just put a frame here to soften the bounce up.
Yeah, or a little highlight with one of Terry's Depron sources or something. Just
it's quick. You're maintaining a kind of pace, and you're maintaining a kind of quality. Here, I remember we just had a bounce, you know, and then maybe a little wrap light across both eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's Peter Hoare, our fantastic director,
the man himself.
And there's a fantastic set. It was just stunning. And I think the big thing when everybody came onto the set was how small it was.
Yeah, it struck me the first time I walked on. I was like, wow. Like, it really helped me understand how the 65 alters your perception of space, because you know, I would have never guessed it was as small as it was. Even the ceiling heights oddly seemed, I know they weren't low, but you know, some of the arch heights and things seemed lower than you'd think they'd be.
And this is the little kind of library for Mum, for a recharge station. So this was all the kind of a daylight scene with the sun coming in over there. And then kind of contrasting that with a nighttime scene where we'd flip the key the other side and the moonlight kind of comes in on the other windows and up. And that's her kind of, I mean, again, just the layering of the set was stunning.
So much dimension.
and kind of reflections. And then this is, Steve Blackman asked if we could do a dance scene that nobody would forget. And I kind of said, okay, let's light the whole park. And Steve wanted it to be a scene where the two characters are in a normal world, and then they kind of look at each other, and we go into a dance scene. So the idea of basically dropping the lights in as the scene starts, and it's nighttime. So we wrapped all the trees in, poor Jim Lambie, I think, thought I was joking when I said I need to wrap like 6 to 8 trees in lights, and then have all the individual tungsten lights. And then the lights moved as they danced. And I think we had something like 8,000 lights in total. You can see them here. Mm-hmm. And our board op had to kind of keep them, rotating as they were dancing. Here you can see here with a balloon up top, and it worked really well. And it was one of my favorite scenes, and it had a kind of an energy and a kind of happiness.
Mm-hmm. And you lowered the rig in too, which made it even, took it to the next level, where introduced it kind of naturally, where all of a sudden the world transitions right in front of your eyes. It was so beautiful. And
I think he was the highest paid member of the crew, was the crane driver, because we had to get in a guy who could drop a crane as smoothly as possible on cue. So they got the best crane driver in North America to come in at huge cost, and he was absolutely brilliant. He was worth every penny, and it worked so well. And he did it on cue, on time, and he understood, and then he took it out on cue, on time. And it never kind of bounced or anything. It was just smoothly, perfect clutch control.
A unique thing to have on your resume as a crane operator.
Yeah, and then you can see that's the lights disappearing and switching off, and that's the end. And then it's back to reality. And this is one of the other rigs that Richard, our grip, made. He did a fantastic job with our SFX department, Darcy. They made a 360 spinning rig, because when Ellen's having a fight, I think it's in episode, is it episode 8? She kind of fights the guys that jumped them in the car park. I wanted it to feel like they were all sort of spinning in the background as she's propelling them all away with her superpower.
I think it was episode 7.
Yeah, 7. So you can see Ellen, it was pouring rain, so we had to soak her, which she wasn't very happy with, because we're all nice and warm in the studio and we had to pour cold water on her. And then we spun the camera. This is a Phantom. So I think we ran the Phantom at 500 frames, and we had all the fans and everything. And that's us proud fathers of the rig. So that worked so well, and that was a great example of collaboration between all the departments. Mm-hmm. They got it bang on. They really did, because we don't have any time to kind of tweak and change things, but it worked so well. And that's the scene it kind of comes from, with the pouring rain. And that's our testing. There you go, 431 frames we did it on. And then this is a great example of how we'd work out our fight sequences with felt tip pens. So this is Gritty's donuts. So there's number 5 in blue, and then come all the gunmen, and then they're all killed. So it's very funny. It was a very easy way for us to work out with Rick, our stunt coordinator, who's fantastic, where everybody went and where everything would go. And then this was one of our bowling ball rigs. We put a GoPro 360 camera and the bowling ball and threw it down the bowling lane. And then this was Steve Sturczyk, our director. We threw under the bus. Just had to put that in there. And this is our Artemis. So I thought this is a good, for anybody who wants to take a kind of screenshot of all the tech spec of how to set your Artemis to analyze the 65 and the mode we're in, and the 5K and all that kind of stuff, and the 2:1 ratio. And the old tech of an iPhone. So there we go.
There's a great question from Christina actually about how, and we talked about this earlier before we went on the air, about how we've influenced each other working on the show, and how, I know personally, I felt it was the healthiest form of competition, where I would like watch your dailies and go, oh man, that's so awesome, and feeling like okay, now we need to keep upping it. It's like we need to keep raising the game, and we keep elevating this. And I know it was a great feeling, because it was always inspiring watching the dailies, but not in a way that was anything but productive.
Yeah, no, and I felt like we were in a family. I felt like it was kind of like a brotherly thing, that
Mm-hmm.
we were kind of healthy, kind of keeping up with each other. And I think it helps being, because I was a huge fan of your work on Fargo.
Oh, thank you.
So I already was like, this work is fantastic, because everything I'd seen that you'd done was phenomenal. So you couldn't do anything wrong in my eyes. So
right back at you. And the world you created, and you were so inclusive about it too, which I think is really important. Let's be honest, there's all a sense of competition between DPs, of course, but when you're alternating on a show, it's so important that it's cumulative and it keeps elevating and doesn't devolve into the unhealthy competition that can cause things to break down, and then the poor crew feels like they're stuck in a bad marriage.
Yeah, no, and I think the crew feel it.
Not a good scene.
You can sense when there's stress and when something's not right, and I think it puts people off their game a little bit. And I think we kind of, the environment I like to kind of have on set is for everybody to feel included, and then kind of offer up suggestions and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you get the best out of people that way.
Yeah, no, totally. And I really loved working with you, and I think.
I loved working with you. And it's so, that you're, as an introduction to the 65, you were fantastic at kind of introducing me to it in a way that, like the Tushman images was a great example of how.
Yeah. When I got the name wrong, it's Richard Tushman. I think I called him Robert. I got my Robert and my Richards mixed up.
That's fine. But it's just such a wonderful format, and it was something that could have been intimidating, or it could have been, or confusing in some ways, but it was so inherent to the world that had been built on the pilot that it was a relatively easy thing to walk into and to say, okay, I get this. I understand this world, and I understand how it all fits together, which is so important as an alternating DP, because I personally like the chameleon aspect of alternating on shows, where you kind of have to, you bring yourself to the show, but you also kind of leave yourself behind and say, okay, how can I find my version of what this show is?
Yeah.
So it's still personal and unique. And you're not just completely sort of giving yourself into something that may or may not be your specific taste. And, the show opened itself up to so many opportunities to do that. And then I just found that it was inspiring, and the crew was inspired too. I think the crew gets, when they have that kind of a collaborative environment you're talking about, the crew then becomes kind of a through line as well. Like I know I would always check in with Terry and the crew about, what was done on the last episode that is something that, we can continue on with, or we can take a little different path with, or, so there's always a through line of continuity through it, but it's still evolving and changing.
Yeah, and I think I think the best way I can describe it is like an open door.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an open door to any DP. I've talked to so many DPs about the 65 because we did so much research into it, and you just pass on the knowledge.
Yeah, you broke a lot of ground.
Yeah, and I think as DPs, I love you tell everybody everything, because you always do it in your own way anyway. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's true. That's the funny thing, is it's competitive, but ultimately it's not, because we're all individuals. So there's only one of you in the world. There's only one of me in the world. There's only one of everybody. So the competition is purely internal mainly.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any other questions. I think we're good for questions. Let me just see if there's anything else in my still. I've got a ton of stills of frame grabs and things.
Yeah, the question about stunts. How much do we let stunts take over and decide what shots they're having versus storytelling? I think the directors that's all discussed beforehand. Rick was fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to discuss with the director what the priorities are, what we're putting across. So when we came to the stunts, we kind of, everybody knew what we were doing.
Yeah, the pre-visualizations that Rick did were so important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then
The fight, I think you did a fight with in the house, was it the B&B?
Yes.
It's just one of the best fights I've ever seen. It was
Oh,
just
thanks. That was a great example of, I mean, Mary J. Blige was totally game for doing as much as she could, as was Cameron. So the Hazel and Cha-Cha characters, basically both actors were like, we want to do as much as we possibly can. And there's a few shots of Mary where you see it's Mary in that sequence, and it just makes it so amazing when you see like she's just giving it her all, and you know it's Mary J. Blige, and then you see Cameron taking the punches, and you know it's Cameron.
yeah.
and then incredible doubles that would just
Yes.
I can't remember the name of
She was fantastic. Yeah, I can't remember, but she was.
I
Such
can't remember her name. She's incredible, and as energetic on take 10 as she was on take 1. You know,
yeah.
it's
and they've got to do it
unbelievable.
with a mask on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's just unreal. And that, but Rick was so collaborative as well. Like Rick would certainly have ideas, and he would stage the scenes in a way where you could tell he was thinking about the lenses, he was thinking about camera placement when he's staging it, but it was never like, this is only going to work from here. It was always like, okay, you know, if we do this little move here, can we sell that? And, you know, it was always collaborative and cumulative, as the show's always is. And I just loved it. It was fun.
Yeah. No, and I think it never felt too stunty either. You know, it felt part of the story.
Yeah, it was always a good messy. Like that fight in the B&B is just a mess. It's like they're just scrapping, just trying to save themselves. And it's not that kind of super choreographed, really clean, like everyone's taking punches cleanly. It's just messy. And, you know, it's so great. And then Jeremy Webb, our director for that fight, you know, we always wanted to keep alive that the sense of peril, because she's on the chair and she's about to go in the hot tub, and there's the rope system and all that. So it was that having that additional layer to the fight, which is so great about the scripts, is the fights are always about other things. You know, it's never just, now we're going to take a break from the drama to have a fight. The fight is always intrinsic to the story, and there's always another layer to the fight that you can bring to it to keep it from just being, you know, endless cross coverage of people throwing and taking punches. You can actually build other layers into the fights. Like the fight at Gritty's Donuts was just like, that could have easily been a straight up gun battle. Yeah. But it was just, there was so many, the fact that Five can blink just made it this other thing where it just became so interesting.
Yeah, and you can, like the department store fights, you know, and I think it goes down to the quality of the writing, where you can just have so much fun filming it. And I think that's because I think the DP's filming Umbrella Academy is just the best job, because there's kind of so much variation. There's so much quality writing that you can visually go to town with.
Oh yeah, and then your call sheets are crazy. It's like you start out with this big epic battle, and then you've got a scene where two people are pouring their hearts out to one another, and then you go and you do something hilarious with Klaus, and it's like the whole day is like an emotional roller coaster where you go from like extreme violence to comedy to tragedy to the apocalypse. It's just, you know, it's a dream show.
Yeah. And I think there's a magic that comes out of all that. You know, I think when everybody's throwing everything at it, it really does. Because you can tell the shows that are not good fun, that kind of seem to just kind of crawl along a little bit. And that must have been just hell on earth to work on.
Yeah.
Like if you can get everybody collaborating and everybody's game is just firing on all cylinders, there's kind of magic that comes out of it.
Yeah, and there's an energy to that just builds on itself. And then that energy, like you said, goes through the lens and the audience feels it, because the audience certainly responded to the show, you know, as well as we'd hoped, and in some ways better than we'd hoped.
Yeah.
And connected with things, you know, you always hope that the ideas that you have sitting around a boardroom table or, you know, in a meeting will connect with the audience. And then when they do, you're like, oh, maybe we were right. And maybe this is, you know. And then once you see that, then you're like, okay, now we know what we can do. It's great.
I just wonder if there's any questions we've missed.
There was one question early on, I think. Oh, it was Ian was asking, could we further break down processes / arguments for recommending a shooting format? For example, Super 35 versus anamorphic versus LF versus 65. And what story art reasons would drive you towards a larger or smaller sensor? And how did you best articulate those arguments beyond the documents?
I think it's what you hit on earlier, wasn't it? It's that kind of heightened realism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think if you're doing a contemporary show that's on the move, like the show I'm just doing at the moment before, you know, the whole kind of lockdown started, we're shooting on the mini LFs because it's a fast moving show that's handheld.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to be a mini LF. You know, that was the perfect animal. And if the mini LF wasn't there, you'd probably shot it on a mini. You know, because it had to feel, it's contemporary, it had to feel real. Whereas our world is heightened and not real. In the same way that a lot of your, you know, you could easily go anamorphic, but our set designs kind of restricted us to not go anamorphic. The argument not to go anamorphic. But I think it's just, it's like when I get a script for a job, I kind of can see it in my head. And if I don't see it in my head, I know it's not the job for me. And you kind of know what camera, you know what visual language, what visual references that make sense for the storytelling. Oh, you're frozen.
Yeah, and the story will ultimately ask, you know, it'll kind of ask you and tell you what it wants to be. You know, like I always try to, like with you, I read a script and I kind of try to bring a fresh mind to it and say, okay, I know what I like, but what does this want to be, and how can I take what I like and mold it into what this wants to be? And you know, you see a lot of, I mean, anamorphic's very popular right now, but anamorphic isn't necessarily the right choice for everything. And if this was if Umbrella was a 239 show, it'd be a very different thing, and it would be a very different audience experience.
Yeah.
And you know, I know, like when we in the Tall Grass, which was a Netflix feature I did after Umbrella, you know, I said I'd love to get the 65 into this field because it would be incredible to be inside this field of grass with the Lexus 65, but it just wasn't practical, A, on a budget level, and B, on a physical level, to get that camera into those environments and, you know, not have it be something that bogs down the schedule. So we ended up shooting on the LF, which was still a great choice. And that was before the mini LF was available. So we were still struggling with the full size LF, you know, with gimbals, with mounts, with rigs, that kind of thing. You know, and the crew all stepped up and made it work, but it was that process where it's like, this would be the optimal, but what's practical and what's realistic from a budget and a logistical standpoint. So, I mean, I think everything has to be its own choice. And ultimately it's the story that drives it, and then everything else should follow.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think discussion, you know, if you discuss with the producers, with the director, you'll know what camera to use. You know, I think for any DPs asking, you know, and I think if you've got any reservations, it's probably the wrong camera.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, if you're thinking, you know, if there's anything you're thinking that might not be right, it's probably not right.
Yeah. Anything else?
Let's see here. I think that caught us up on all the existing questions. A question about, did we do much work on longer focal lengths?
We did with the big Hawk zoom. Remember our big Hawk 150 to 50, which we'd use, I'd say, once every 2 months or something, didn't we? But
I think I used it once.
Yeah, when we used it, it was worth its weight in gold. I remember I used it for the heist, the bank heists. I remember Pete Sweeney was up on a cherry picker, and he was filming on like a 450, as if it was like happening, you know, like an alive kind of event. And we used it a lot for the odd kind of apocalypse, kind of long lens sort of C camera. It was all C camera would end up with the Hawk zoom.
I think I used it on the crossroads sequence to the long lens of the ice cream truck coming down the road. We had that great road with those layered hills.
Yeah,
we jammed in on the long lens, and I think we shot at the same time as the drone. We were bringing the the truck in with the drone and shot the hawk.
So yeah, I think we can answer. We weren't afraid to go long lens.
Yes. Yeah, but again, it was story driven, and I mean, I personally, I agree with you. I think I shot probably 80% of the season on the 25 or the 35.
Yeah. Ooh, someone's asking, did we come to the script or the comic first? I came script first.
Yeah, so did I.
I didn't know anything. Umbrella Academy, coming from Scotland, it wasn't part of my kind of radar. And it was, Steve Blackman introduced me to it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I'm not really a graphic novel guy, so I didn't really know about it. I knew about My Chemical Romance and I knew about the band, but I didn't know that they had, the singer had this side project with these books. And when I got the book, it was, I just couldn't believe what I was reading. I thought, this is such a crazy world. And, but I saw the script first and then kind of realized where they were coming at. And Steve obviously brought his own unique take to the material. I mean, Steve has a very unique sensibility, God bless him. And he brought so much of that to that world. And there's a humanity to Steve's work that I think really shone through, which I think is part of the reason it resonated the way it did with the audience.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think the 65 just made it different. And I think that, because the Umbrella Academy is a different, unique graphic novel compared to all the rest. And I think the TV show had to have a nod to that.
Yeah.
And it had to be a unique, different superhero or, dysfunctional superhero show.
Was that part of your initial pitch?
That was my kind of gut reaction, kind of reading it going, but this is the perfect show for this camera that we've just shot Altered Carbon on. Because it was an open playing field at that point.
Yeah. It's hard to even imagine what the show would be without the 65, to be honest. Like you can't even imagine it, which obviously makes it the right choice, is you can't imagine what would season 1 look like if we shot it on a mini, like it would be, I can't even imagine. I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of questions about season 2, when it's coming out.
I think it's coming out soon. I think it's sort of summertime, isn't it?
I think it's early summer. I mean, we're not at liberty to discuss too much details on it, but from what I understand, it's an early summer release.
And it's even better than season 1.
I loved it. I mean, it's so different. I mean, I won't say too much, but it was so different than season 1, but in the best ways.
Yeah. And we should do another one. And then, because there's lots of technical things we could discuss that we can't discuss.
Yes. Yeah, actually, a season 2 version would be great, because it was a different creature, for sure.
An animal. We changed a lot of things, which on the part 2 of this CSC Live, we can discuss.
That's right, the sequel.
Yeah.
There's one last question here. Brendan asks, how do you feel about speculation that the arrival of the new Super 35 Arri camera will mark an enthusiastic return to Super 35 over the newer, larger formats? I think
that it's got a place, the new 4K S35,
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking strictly about resolution, that's kind of an apples to apples discussion. But when you're talking about sensor size, that's an apples and oranges discussion in my mind. Like a Super 35 size sensor, and even the LF with a 65 sensor, that's a whole different storytelling tool. I don't even feel there's really a comparison there. Obviously resolution matters with streaming services, but the immersive quality of the larger sensors is just something that is beyond the technical. Like that is, that's an aesthetic, emotional choice almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's what I love about it, is the immersive.
Yeah, no,
quality.
completely. Any more? Is that?
Just before we wrap up, I guess we should wrap up soon. I mean, I feel like we could go on forever, but maybe other people don't feel that way.
So season 2 will be on Netflix.
Yes.
And I guess hopefully we'll be out of lockdown by then, but who knows?
Yes, I hope so.
I don't know.
Maybe just at the tail end of lockdown when everyone's gone fully stir crazy and they're just looking for that new thing and they can binge Umbrella and then be freed out into the world.
It'll be nice. We can all binge on season 2.
Yes, exactly.
Then we can all go back to work.
That's right. That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
And we should mention that next week, the one and only Greg Middleton will be hosting, whose resume speaks for itself. He's going to talk about Watchmen and presumably all the other incredible work that he's done.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I think his episodes 5, or I can't remember, of Watchmen is the best piece of television I've ever seen.
Fantastic. Yeah, his resume is unbelievable and
It's phenomenal.
And such a nice man to boot. So I'm sure that he'll have a lot of great tales to tell. And season 1 of Umbrella Academy is still on Netflix. If you want to refresh your memory, and I personally, any questions anyone has for me, feel free to reach out on my website, craigwrobleski.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at @Wrobleski. You're on Instagram as well, right?
I'm on Instagram as well. It's the same, and Instagram and Twitter. Happy to answer questions.
And you've got a website as well.
Yeah, which I need to get up and running.
Yes, I have to update mine as well.
I've been working for 31 years, and suddenly realised that I don't have a website, and I keep meaning to do it. So I'm in the process of getting my website up and running.
I'm in the process of updating mine. So, and my email is pretty easy to remember. It's craig@craigwrobleski.com if you want to get in touch.
Yeah.
Feel free to fire away with questions.
Yeah, I'm the same as neville.kid@btinternet.com.
Excellent.
But yeah, no, as we were saying, it's an open door policy, so happy to kind of share.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want to get all mushy on you back at the end, but here at the end. But I just want to thank you for being such an awesome collaborator and for being so inclusive in the process of building the world of Umbrella. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to continue it as soon as possible.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure back. It's been awesome as a North American.
What would the Scottish term for that be?
Yeah. All Scottish terms are swear words, so I can't repeat them.
Fair enough. It's a family show. I guess we could leave it open to any other last minute questions people have, or we can just wrap it up. I'm not sure what the best MO is. We can.
I think
it feels like
I think we're good to wrap up. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Cool, but no, I really enjoyed that. That was great. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I feel like we were just getting started, but
and I've just survived our daylight. The sun is setting.
I know.
It's very. You go and put a light on.
Your side's become increasingly moody.
I know.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. And like I said, any other questions, follow-ups, or whatever, feel free to get in touch. And thanks for doing this, Neville.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. And stay safe and stay sane, everyone.
Yes, everybody stay safe and well, and we'll all get through this, and we'll all be working back together as soon as humanly possible.
Perfect.
Oh, and Christina says they'll definitely have us back for season 2, so maybe a year from now we'll be doing the same thing.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
See you later.